Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 613, Who Gave Elon COVID? Monday, November 16th, 2020. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. We often speak in vague terms about the problems inherent in social media. But now an international group of experts and critics have issued a report detailing specific recommendations on how big tech can clean up its game. Will it work? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, the dangerous power of influencer envy, getting your employees on TikTok, the unexpected consequences of the political ad ban, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with one of the seminal players in social media marketing within the automotive industry, who is now the Senior Communications Lead for SME, author, speaker, Mr. Christopher Barger. Christopher, what's going on?
Hey, Bob, it's great to be here again. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Always. You're always welcome here. Now, next, he's the founder of Vivaldi Group, as well as the author of several books, including his latest, The Interaction Field. Mr. Eric Jacobsthaler is here. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so glad we got you back on the program.
Yeah, absolutely. Every year.
Once a year. And finally, we have the Chief Marketing and Brand Officer for GRK Fresh Creek, as well as board member at Mashburn Enterprises, Mr. Jonathan Sackett. Hi, Jonathan.
Fresh off of COVID.
This is your first
much better. Yes.
Your official announcement of your COVID demise. Unbelievable.
Yes, my demise has been overrated, but I'm alive and I'm here. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I'm glad that you're on the program.
Those questions? No.
Yeah, let's ask all about that.
The rest of the show, you know what? I got to be careful about what I say, because the last time I was on the show, I don't know if you guys knew this, Bob called the show Jonathan's Enormous Head. So, you know what? I'm just going to be quiet. I'm going to answer questions, and I'm going to be good tonight.
In all fairness, it was something he brought up, but we won't go into that. We'll go right into the subjects that we're going to talk about for this evening. First up, the BBC covered an interesting debate among some of the more notable social media critics around the globe. What do these networks need to look like in the future if we are trying to avoid the worst that they will bring out in all of us, was the question they were trying to ask. Now, the international group has created a report of sorts proposing lots of ideas to would-be government regulators. My question, Jonathan, is does knowing how the algorithms work or adding friction to the spread of ideas or any of the other kinds of thoughts that they've put forward really give us an advantage in this fight? Or is it a lost cause even before we begin? What's your take on the state of social media and whether these recommendations will have effect?
Yeah, this is a mess. This is a tough one. And when I saw your notes and I saw that this was mine, I was like, uh-oh. I think we're all going to get nasty messages after Sackett addresses this one. Okay, so and trust me, as always, I'm interested in playing mental ping pong with this, but I will tell you something. First of all, we will never be free of idiots. Okay, it is what it is. There's always going to be some 13-year-old punk out there hiding behind the perceived anonymity of the net and writing terrible things. Okay, It's also a constant race, just like I've always brought up, between the bulletproof vest and the bullet. You make a faster bullet, you make a hollow point, you make a more powerful one, you have to have better, superior armor to stop it, and they go back and forth. Toothpaste, the toothpaste wars over sugary foods. There's always going to be this this one-upping on each side for a limited amount of time. Okay. So right now, I think it's safe to say that our technology has surpassed our humanity. Okay. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of disinformation. And one of the things that I was reading up on this, they were talking about was the statutory building code. Okay. So basically, in my mind, the way I was assessing this is there are three main points to this, right? That they were saying, look, we have to set some sort of guardrails. How are we going to stop people from saying negativity? Let's face it, if you want to, you can put code breakers on there so that you can't use negative words or swear words. Well, people have figured out instead of using a letter S, you use a dollar sign. There's ways in and out of this, but the statutory building code, number one, they're saying all newly viral content will be stopped so it can be fact checked. Well, the problem with fact checking is who's checking the facts. Now, anybody who's listened to the show before or follows me on Twitter knows that I'm at constant odds with Twitter purging my accounts and everything else. Well, who's checking facts? I don't say anything negative. I might have an occasional joke, but mostly it's industry-related stuff. The second point was to force networks to disclose in their feeds why content is being recommended to them. The problem with that, again, is your web page or your social presence starts to turn into Kool in the Gang, meaning you've got 900 guys on stage and you don't know who's playing the guitar. Well, if you start to, mention everything, well, this is here because of this, and this is here because of this. Your content won't get read because people can't get past that. Okay.
Yeah.
The third point is the limited use of. They want to limit the use of micro-targeting. Okay, but if you do that, you're not understanding how financially these sites make money and stay alive and stay in business. It's because of advertisers like us. We're out there and I need that micro-targeting data so I can see who I'm speaking to. And if you remove that, you can't charge a premium and I can't pay for it. So what does this all look like? So the way that I look at it as there's common sense things, porn. There's common sense things like swearing, and there's common sense things like perceived bullying. What seems to be working right now with a lot of these sites is report this content if it's offensive or whatever else. Well, what happens then is it gets submitted, somebody can assess it and look at it. The problem is if you enforce, not only are you treading on free speech and freedom of expression, if you don't have some sort of basic guardrails, since there's a lot of idiots out there, if you don't have the basic guardrails, you cannot have good content that'll be interesting enough, interactive enough, and people want to engage with it. So I think the bare minimum is to say, report this content. Here's the words that you can and cannot use, word blockers and things like that. That's the best you can do. Anything else is going to open a whole can of worms. And while you're busy fighting that good fight to say, no, my social presence or my social site isn't allowing for these things, 10 other social sites are going to pop up and steal your thunder. That was a mouthful, but
it was, and I don't know how to feel about a lot of what you just said, because it's just like on the
warm and fuzzy, Bob.
Well, on the one side, it makes a lot of sense what you're trying to get across. That there's always going to be that guy out there who's saying the thing that you don't want to say. How are you going to police it? How it's unreasonable to expect everything to be policed in such a fashion. But I don't think that's the core of the argument here. I think the core of the argument here is that these platforms, whether you're talking about Facebook or YouTube or anything, they accelerate and amplify the voice of these individuals, and they help through their discovery methodology to propagate these ideas online. And there's no transparency in how the algorithms are being displayed to us, how they're working behind the scenes. So that's at the heart of the problem. I mean, there's no transparency in this process.
That's a good point. The problem, though, I agree with you, but the problem is once you lift your skirt a little too high and you show the algorithm, it's giving everybody causality to manipulate the algorithm.
Precisely.
So, that therein lies the rub. You have to keep some sort of mysticism behind it. Now, there's also got to be, common sense has to come into play here. And just like when we're creating content, when we're doing shows and movies and things like that, we're always coming across and saying you have to provide a willing suspension of disbelief. Do you believe everything you read? Is everything a trusted source? You guys know as well as I do, these news sources they're becoming part of the story now. So you have to kind of be able to take a step back and have common sense in all this. But if you show people too much as to what you're doing, it will get exploited. And that's the challenge.
Christopher, I hear you kind of agreeing in the background. What is your thoughts about all this? I mean, what do you suggest that the social media platforms do to mitigate these problems?
First of all, I was agreeing wholeheartedly. That was my number one bullet here, was that the more you show the algorithm, the more you are teaching people or inviting people to try and game it and get around the guardrails that you put up. The other thing I would point out, I guess, is that this is somewhat of a supply and demand issue. There are, we talk about Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and everybody needing to put up these guardrails. There is an audience that is demanding this, and somebody is always going to pop up and supply. So if you have Facebook and Twitter and some of the other major players enforcing and doing what we want them to do, you'll just have other sites. There's been a lot of talk in the last 2 weeks about an exodus to Parler or to Gab. You will always have another site that will pop up and provide the service that the mainstream platforms are no longer perceived to be providing. So I'm not sure that just blocking it out is going to work.
No, but that's different though, because when you segregate the audience out to their own little special world where they're existing and playing and having their little conspiracy theory fests, it loses its power to infect other people within the network. I mean, I hate to talk about infection with all the COVID stuff going on, but I mean,
yeah, hey, slow down with that, man.
But I mean, but really, I mean, that's the real problem. Everybody watches YouTube. Everybody goes to Twitter. It's just like you have such a huge audience on Facebook. And when you can amplify your idea and spread it around via the algorithm, you can get new adherents to your theory. It's very easy for people to search it out. When you segregate it out to its own network, you still have all those yahoos going on and on about whatever the conspiracy theory du jour is, but it's not really affecting the greater network. So is that really a problem?
I understand what you're saying. I hear it. On the other hand, you and I and everybody on this call, we've seen a lot of the theories and a lot of the disinformation that's out there. We're not believing it. We're not buying it. So I think some responsibility has to be placed back on the audience to say, I am going to take the active step in parsing out what is real and what is not. I care about reality. You're asking Facebook and YouTube and some of the others to be an arbiter for truth that the audience may or may not want. And I'm not sure that that's a responsibility, that it's fair to ask of them. And I think Jonathan said something that also plays into this here that makes me worry a little bit. Once you've given the government, whether it's state government, federal government, whomever, once you've given them the power to tell a certain platform you can or can't publish, or you have to have these guardrails and you have to, block disinformation, you are giving that power to a government, presuming that government actually cares about fact and cares about the impact that these, that some of the spread of disinformation is having.
Well, and just to pile onto that, it's a little bit worse than that, because look at the NSA and look at all these initiatives that we've had ever since 9/11. Once you grant that power to the government, it will never come back. When have you ever seen a law say, you know what, we're the government, and we're listening in on your cell phones and stuff, we're going to give that back and we're going to stop doing that? That's never going to happen. So once you put too much power in the hands of that entity, whatever that entity becomes, once you put that power in their hands, it is now gone. You will never get it back.
Now, I agree, and that's kind of where I was going. You're presuming good actor on the part of the regulatory body, and I think we've
Right.
seen that doesn't always happen. I'm not trying to abrogate the platforms, whether it's Zuckerberg or Google or Alphabet or whomever. I'm not trying to abrogate them of their responsibility. I think it's a private sector decision that has to be made where they say this is not the community that we want to build, and we are conscious of the impact of some of what's happening on our platform, and we're going to step up. I don't think the guardrails are bad. I just don't know that it's the place of a regulatory body to say we want this to happen, and you're going to do it.
I think you're right, and I think wouldn't it be nice if you could say technology and humanity go hand in glove? Wouldn't that be just a wonderful thing to say?
Has it ever?
Yeah, and unfortunately, the lowest common denominator is much lower than the people listening to this show right now and attending this show right now. There's always going to be that outlier, that outcast, the people that just want to see the world burn. And so what do? If you can't strip the rest of us of some cerebral content because you have to cater to the lowest denominator. So, like I said, my point of view is, look, there are certain guardrails that you can provide, knowing that the guardrails have to be fluid and they're going to have to change over time, because the more guardrails you put up, the more workarounds that denominator will come up with.
Eric, I'd love for you to weigh in on this, because a lot of great ideas have been kind of thrown around and a lot of good thinking about whether or not this is even possible to manage individuals' behavior online and if this is going to have any impact. But what's your take on all this? Do these recommendations offer any kind of really straightforward, maybe not easy, but at least understandable path forward so that we can make a difference here within the social communities?
I've been struggling in this conversation with the fact that this has been going on now, about 15 years or something, social media.
Yeah.
And now after 15 years, we sort of discuss these regulatory means or ways of controlling the thing in a time when, I don't know, Facebook has 1.3 billion or something followers or something, and I wondered, why are we discussing this 2020 now? Why shouldn't this is like a Wild West for 15 years,
well, in large part, it's being talked about right now, and it's been talked about increasingly since 2016 because of the election of Donald Trump. I mean, it's just like that's what spurned most of this conversation. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there was a study done at Yale that Trump was one of the biggest source of dissemination of misinformation. I thought, like, think about how many people are on Twitter, let's say, and to be the number one source.
Oh my God! Yeah,
you got to be working 24 hours and plus more.
Well, it's kind of sad, and when you think about it, it's kind of sad that that's what drove us to finally address what's going wrong with social media and the amplification of bad ideas. When there was before Trump, there was revenge porn, there was cyberbullying, there was child trafficking. I mean, there's all kinds of really terrible things that have been happening via these big tech giant networks that are doing all this. It's just like it took Donald Trump being an idiot, and I'm sorry if anybody's a Trump supporter out there, but I mean, you got to get over it. It's just like he.
Yeah.
But
you know what, Bob? The only other thing that I'd add to that is that a lot of listeners may not know this. Eric has somewhat of an accent because he's from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A lot of people don't.
But I mean, it's just like political misinformation is front and center in this debate. So what about the cyberbullying? What about the revenge porn? Does this report adequately address all the dark corners of online social interaction simply by proposing things like making it more a friction positive when you're sharing an idea, that ideas can't, when they start to accelerate, they need to be paused to be evaluated. That doesn't mean evaluate everybody's posts. That means when an idea starts to take off, to be able to put a pause on it and be able to assess it before you allow it to spread any further. I mean, it seems like a reasonable request, and it seems like it addresses the political misinformation problem, but what about all these other problems with social media? And I mean,
Bob, that's what I had the problem with the list that I read. You know, I say like, okay, you do this one. Is that just a Band-Aid for everything else? You know, there's so much more to come. And it just seems like, a little bit, that's why I said earlier, it's a little bit late and a little bit not enough, or how do I know that, you're really cleaning up the those networks, you know, the misinformation or cyberbullying or whatever it is, all these various issues. So it seems like a something chasing it. It's sort of chasing a I don't know what you would say. You know, you're trying to run behind something.
Chasing your own tail, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, coming up through all the big ad agencies, it always, one of the running things that I've always believed in was sales overnight and brand over time. Well, it's the same for something like this. There's Band-Aids that you can use today, but you need constant chronic education over time so that lower denominator isn't as low as we want it to be. Now, you can't just say, okay, well, everybody's going to be smart and we're all the problems will go away. Well, they're not going to. But what we have to do is, if we don't think about this twofold, one is the guardrails and to keep people on track, and two is to say, look, you still get your freedom of speech and freedom of expression, but we're also going to help educate everybody to get everybody up to a higher level of understanding. And like I said earlier, the willing suspension of disbelief. If you can't read something and really discern that drinking bleach will not kill COVID, okay, that's drinking bleach or drinking anything like that is stupid. But again, it always takes me back to my law school days when the famous case of the ladder. If you look at it, go buy a ladder. And if you look at all those stickers on it, don't stand above this, don't do this, don't carry something up the ladder, don't do that. That all became because of a lawsuit from a farmer who set his ladder up to paint his barn, and he set it up in cow crap. So the ladder slipped in cow crap, and he hurt himself, and he sued the ladder company and got millions of dollars. So, I mean, come on. Everybody in their right mind would understand not to do that. But if you're catering to a low denominator, this is what's going to happen, and these problems are going to remain unless you can bring that denominator up higher, which takes time. So in the meantime, you put the Band-Aids on it, and you have a watchful eye on it, and who's watching the watchers? So
Now, there's one other thing, Jonathan. You've mentioned freedom of speech a couple of times, and obviously that's an important thing. This is something that you hear in the hallways of business all the time. Freedom of speech does not equal freedom from consequence. And if you say something, this is, I think, something that the platforms could be doing when there is somebody violating anything, whether it is the spread of disinformation and provably false information, or child trafficking, or cyberbullying, or revenge porn. It has to be technologically possible. And obviously, I'm not in Silicon Valley, and I don't know this, but I have to think that it's possible to figure out, rather than, to Jonathan's point, rather than making everybody suffer for the misactions of a few, isn't it possible to block specific people and say, okay, this is why we can't have nice things, and you're not allowed here anymore, and you're out permanently? There's got to be ways to do that without punishing everybody else.
Exactly. And Christopher, I just want to tell you with all sincerity, you actually had me at revenge porn. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, I've said this before on the show. We've said this. Many guests have agreed with it. Most of the tools that allow these ills to flourish are fueled entirely by advertising's demand for over-targeting the audience. I mean, there's no other way to look at it. So can any solution really stand without complicity from the ad community trying to push for abandoning these approaches? I know something that you said up front, Jonathan, kind of concerned me. It was the idea that by saying that we don't want this type of tracking, that we don't want this type of acceleration, what we're really doing is killing the opportunity for these platforms to make money, because that shows that we don't understand how advertising works. And my question is, if advertising needs to work like that, should advertising take a stand and say, this is not what we want anymore? This is not the way we want to approach things, because we're the problem. The only reason that all this goes on, the only reason that ideas accelerate and we have this amazing ability to target and hyper-target and micro-target every single person on the platform is because of the advertising that goes on. So if we fix that demand, wouldn't that give an incentive to the platform to stop trying to do this? I mean, Jonathan, I was directing it at you, but I mean, It's just like anybody can answer.
Well, hey, I'm sorry. I've tuned out the whole first part of the show. What has happened so far?
So you got over COVID.
That's the only important thing that has come out so far is Sackett is still breathing. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, we are part of the problem because we need the data. And what you're talking about is dead on, Bob. It's circular logic. Well, we need the data so you can charge a premium, so we can keep you in business, so we can use the data. So what you've got is this circular logic. Now, unless somebody comes up with
before you go any further, one of the things that maybe it's a lie, maybe it's just a fact that we've accepted for so long and it's just not true anymore. I don't know what we can say to ourselves, but this idea that we need to target via platforms like Facebook. Facebook has replaced television for most of us, for many of us in the United States at this point. We spend more time looking at Facebook than we do on the TV. So why do we need to target any more effectively on social media than we have targeted for years on television, where television commands huge premium dollars and Facebook doesn't? So what I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Why can't we just sell, based on general demographics, sell an ad and not hyper-target? Wouldn't we have the same impact as television? Wouldn't it be a good replacement for it?
Well, that's a good question, Bob. But please keep in mind, I am brilliant.
I hear that.
If you're ever going to debate me, you'd better not do it here. Okay?
Having met Eric and read some of his work, no, Eric is probably the most brilliant of all of us, but that's beside the point.
But here's the only difference, Bob, is that television tracking is screwed up. And you know that better than all of us. I know that. So, there's doing the tracking on the DVR, repeat watch, blah, blah, blah. That stuff waved goodbye to us before it ever even started. Now, what we can do with internet tracking is you've got active and passive data. That's the difference, is that not only can I tell session duration, interactivity, opinions, vernacular, those are things that TV can't even touch. So now you can say, well, I mean, is that overkill? I mean, really, Jonathan, if you're, now we've taken over this restaurant chain on top of everything else, and we're rapidly expanding, do I really need to know that the average customer to a fast casual category of Greek food is going to be somebody who also loves knitting? Well, okay, you probably don't need that depth and to that dimension of a personification of the brand, personification of the target. But I got to tell you, more data is gooder. And I'd rather look at it as a big money. But the more data we can have access to, the stronger I can come up with, creative concepts around sense of humor, knowing what types of things are going to resonate with the audience. more experimentation, but it's that active and passive data collection combined that allows me to set a trigger, to set a tonality, and to set a vernacular for the things in the ways that I want to talk about.
But isn't it that simple that the TV was built on a model of spray and pray, right? And you could never measure.
We're still talking about TV, right?
Yeah.
Yes, he's still talking about TV. Stop
Eric
it.
He's so sensual. I just love it.
And so the Facebook world and just changed that model, and it's almost like that's the value of the model is what you call data, but in a sense is that you're much more clear of what impact you're putting. You basically have a perfect correlation between how you spend it and who is buying. So ultimately, I mean that's the advantage. So you call it data, but that's what it is, And so, and I think that Bob, to your point, we have evolved, and the imprecision of spray and pray of the past is just you can't dial dial back the clock anymore, in my opinion. So
yeah.
That's why
and I'm not meaning to suggest. I'm not so stupid, I guess is the best way to say it. I'm not so idiotic or naive to think that targeting is not something that's better for marketers. I mean, targeting it has become one of the best ways, the cheapest, most effective way to reach a customer and convince them to buy a product. I mean, that's fantastic for us. But it's just like, is it wise to continue to have that when the byproduct of that is the spread of misinformation, is the ability to micro-target and hyper-target people with, dangerous ideas. I mean, these types of things are going on all the time, and it's all because of advertising. There's no other way to look at it. So, just because it's good for us doesn't make it good for everybody, and just because it's effective doesn't make it right to use it. And I think that's the hard question that a lot of advertisers need to start asking themselves and start wrestling with the answer of what we do about it.
Well, Bob, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, I've heard that somewhere. I'm not really sure where. Hey.
Check. Okay.
Well, I'm going to continue this conversation into the next topic because an Australian academic research study found that, no surprise, envy was the driving force behind the success of most social influence campaigns.
What?
What was more interesting, though, was the finding that envy cuts both ways. While it was effective at driving purchase in many cases, it also would many times blow up in the face of brands if their effort to create this envy ran afoul of acceptable behavior or context. Like the person who goes off on a massive vacation not wearing a mask during COVID. I mean, something like that can blow back on the brand. Or the woman who dressed up in the fiery orange dress in front of the wildfires. I mean, it's just like... There's so many bad so many bad situations that come.
About her, can we?
No. Right, envy cuts both ways. Eric, most of this study seems obvious, but does verbalizing the E word, the envy word, help marketers shape better crafted and maybe brand safe influencer campaigns? Does it help us to understand the emotion that drives audiences and hopefully avoid the pitfalls from using it?
I have I agree with the study. With your assessment. It's quite obvious. That envy is sort of plays in both ways, and so I felt like, okay, so the study has proven it, and now what? What does it help me to run a better campaign? And I think, I actually think that. The whole influencer marketing, the real question here is this whole influencer marketing world is just it's just another form of it's just another communications channel, and I think what I've written in my book is that that maybe we need to move away from this communications. Hope that through communications we can influence consumers and to in this day and age, in this networked age, and I think that that maybe there's this in the old days we talked about engagement, and there was sort of like this word that came in the advertising world a bit, but the answer isn't really, to me, influencer marketing is just another form of trying to make communications effective, and it has all its downfalls and all its problems. Micro influencers don't have a lot of influence, or whatever. We go from the bigger influencers to the micro influencers, and on and on and on. You're shifting sort of like the message, but at the end of the day, it's really trying to engage consumers in your world. And think of an example with Tesla as an example. Tesla, when you drive off a parking lot from a Tesla, you're committing. You're becoming part of a community. You're contributing to the whole brand. You're contributing to the whole value creation. You actually feel like you're doing something good. Actually, you're not just driving away the car and you pay a little bit more than anybody else. You actually believe that you make the autopilot a success because you're driving miles, and all the miles contribute from everyone else. So there are these models out there where you don't think of just influencer marketing as another way of influencing, but where you actually make consumers the actual participants in value creation, rather than just being communicated to, pushed messages to, amplified by a celebrity or a micro influencer, and so I think that the study, that Australian study, is are you really answering a question here, or are you just so you're not really understanding that the problem, by looking at the E word, namely envy, yes or no, it doesn't really help us a lot to your question, Bob, to make the campaigns more effective. We need to, I think, in order to engage with consumers, to do marketing really well, we need to stop thinking about another communications model, another trick, if you will, of persuasion, that's already 70 years old of discussion, or more than that. But we need to think about how we engage consumers. And then, Tesla, I wrote in my book, is just one example. Every car company is putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into the back seats of a car, in order, even the best cars, BMW, Mercedes, Audis, in order to move metal, they have to put dollars in the back seats of the car, and basically, which you ask yourself, does that really make sense? Because your product is so bad that you really need to put money on the back seats in order that somebody buys the damn thing. And look at Tesla, that through engaging with the CEO in this example, to engaging with a very large community, he doesn't even do advertising, and he sells the Teslas, based on simply engaging with people. And if you drive a Tesla, if you drive a Tesla and you tell people over a drink, hey, look, I'm driving a Tesla, because I think it makes everyone safe. It makes a safer highways and things like that. There are 37,000 highway deaths every year, and I'm part of this. I'm why don't you buy a Tesla? This is really a cool thing, and on and on and on. And we all contribute to CO2 reduction of CO2 or greenhouse gas effects and all. So then suddenly it becomes sort of this larger. It's not influencer marketing to communicate some messages again in some form with the help of some celebrities or micro influencers. It becomes actually a meaningful network of value creation. That's what I write. That's what I think we need to rethink about it. Anyway, so
well, we've talked a lot about that on the program. I mean, it's just like, I think that when we say influencer program in this context, and we talk about envy, we're talking about paid influencers who are being hired to endorse the product for the brand. But what you're talking about is much more about the kind of envy that is always perceived in a positive light, if that's the way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like to activate the audience into a mode of advocacy where they want to share it, where they want to Instagram it, where they want to, tweet about it, where they want to show it off to their friends in the parking lot, where they want to go and take their friends on drives. I mean, those types of experiences are much more powerful and much more meaningful than the paid endorser, the paid influencer.
Exactly.
So I mean, when I guess that's what that brings me back to the point about envy. I mean, I think that there are different types of envy. We can look at envy as being something that's very much focused on, the things that are unattainable for us, or we can look at envy as being, my friend has it, so I can get this. It's much more approachable when you're talking about the envy among friends, the envy among peer groups. Christopher, I'd love for you to weigh in on this. I mean, it's just like from an envy standpoint, I think when we think of envy, we immediately go and we start thinking about the 7 deadly sins. It's got a negative connotation to it. And I guess we can honestly say that most of the things that motivate us to do what we're, motivate people to buy products are based on the 7 deadly sins, but that's beside the point. What do you think?
It's all about Greek food and knitting, man.
Well, I mean, it reminds me of FUD. I mean, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We've lived by that for so long in marketing. It's powerful motivators. Yeah. So, I mean, identifying envy, does that help you, hurt you? Does that make you feel like influencer marketing needs a refresh based on an understanding of envy and the different types of envy and understanding what it can mean to your campaign if you do it wrong?
First of all, I do think that influencer marketing is probably in need of a major refresh, both in terms of how brands consider how and why they're doing it, and how the influencers seek to exert their influence. You were talking about defining envy and whether it helps, and my friend has this and therefore I want it. I don't look at that as envy. I look at that as credibility. I don't want something because a friend of mine has it and says, oh, it's good. If my friend says it's good, that is an opinion that I value. That's somebody who's already got credibility with me, and I'm going to leverage that credibility when I make my next purchase decision. So part of how it's being defined as envy, I don't actually consider it envy. I would call it leveraging the credibility of people. And honestly, I would look at it and to a lot of the influencers out there who attract a lot of brand attention and certainly have big audiences. Credibility doesn't come from just taking contracts from a lot of different brands and putting their product up on your feed for a little while. Credibility comes from a more genuine interaction. So to go back to your question about does it have to be reimagined? Yes, it does, because I think the influencers and the brands are getting it all wrong in how we approach it. I think Eric was dead on. You have to kind of look at different motivations rather than fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You want to make the audience feel part of something rather than it's being done to them. You want to make the audience feel like I'm following this person and I'm going to maybe buy into the brand that they're endorsing because I actually really believe that they use it. I don't believe one of the Kardashian family uses 90% of what they put out there. They're just taking the money. I think that has to be yeah, exactly. I think
how dare you?
Yeah, how dare I question their authenticity, right?
I don't even know you anymore, Chris.
So yeah, Bob, I think there is a need of a refresh in terms of what a brand wants to get from an influencer, how an influencer chooses to engage, and how we as an audience probably perceive the whole process. I think we've kind of let it get out of control, and I don't think it's as effective as it's probably propped up to be.
Christopher, I'm going to stick with you for this next topic. After years of brands nervously trying to keep their employees from embarrassing them on social media, and you know how that's gone. I mean, it's just like you worked at big corporations. Many are now actively embracing employees posting on behalf of the brand effort, and TikTok posts in particular are in the heart of the phenomenon. People are, brands out there are in love with having their employees do TikTok stories. So, Christopher, what has changed in the minds of advertising? I mean, what has changed in the minds of advertisers in the way that they approach it?
Nothing, Bob. Honestly, as we've kind of been talking about, there's an entire industry that's built up around encouraging and enabling employee advocacy. I actually got my start in social and digital 15 years ago, trying to teach IBM employees to blog and encourage them to build up audiences. So this is not really new. But before I get into the TikTok conversation, you had said something earlier about, we're the problem. Eric had just said, let's stop thinking about, just another trick of persuasion. That to me is a question that's even bigger than why TikTok. Why we do this, why the brands are pushing people onto TikTok now and pushing employees onto TikTok should really give us pause, I think. Recruiting our employees to promote us for us or promote us, on our behalf is kind of a tacit acknowledgement that what we usually do, promoting ourselves and promoting our products, doesn't work. It doesn't resonate with an audience. And instead of saying, oh gosh, what are we doing that's not landing with people, we find this workaround that says, oh, well, instead of changing our marketing and changing our advertising, let's get our employees to go out there and promote the company with, I work for company X and I do this, and isn't my job great?
But haven't we said that for years? Haven't we?
We're the problem. We are the problem, and we got to change that instead of just trying to plug our employees in to do the job for us.
But haven't we said that for years? Haven't we gone out for years saying our employees are our most underutilized marketing asset? That the frontline worker or the person on the customer service line or the individual executive, that they as advocates make the better salesperson, the better marketer for our program, because they show that I not only work here, I love the company.
Sure.
That seems like it's a positive thing to have happen, but you're saying it's more of a marketing trick and it's not really addressing the fact that we have ineffectual campaigns running all over the place and that we need to turn here and use these. I mean,
exactly. And I should acknowledge, look, a happy employee, a positive employee, talking about their job, talking about what they do in a positive way, absolutely is the most powerful form of recommendation, or the powerful form of influence that we have. The problem is we are trying to engineer it now. We are.
Yes, that's the problem.
Yeah, thank you.
Exactly. It's no longer authentic.
Exactly.
It becomes, and may I interrupt, Chris, because we have about 150 people, right? It's a consulting company, very smart people. We get paid a lot of money. They can talk about endlessly about how these great projects they work with these great clients, and they're all very literal. And guess what? I've tried. We have sort of talked about, hey, Eric, the CEO comes out with his new book. Why don't you talk a little bit about it? To drive sales for the book, and you can also talk about the company, Vivaldi Group. You have no idea how hard it is, because I think that, and if you get it done, if you're trying to push that, you have a nightmare of messages out there from people. It's not just, I found it incredible. First of all, so with the 150 people at my company, Vivaldi, it's incredibly hard to actually motivate people. What you and I naturally do on LinkedIn and or the social medias on a daily basis, a lot of people just don't feel comfortable or know how to do it. Even the most literal people, who've been trained maybe in college or something like that. So I think, and then you are really spinning out of control. That's I think what you're arguing, Chris. You sort of like you get some messages out there. It's no longer authentic. It's not really heartfelt. It sort of becomes a little. It just becomes sort of an ineffective tool.
Right. It does, and I'll go back to an experience in my past career that I think demonstrates this. You can't engineer something like this. Look, I used to work for General Motors in during the period of the bankruptcy. That's I got to write a book out of it. That's kind of where I got to be on shows like this. the Fastlane blog worked best and won all sorts of awards when we had Bob Lutz on there as its main author. Not only was he a high-ranking executive and legendary in the industry and all that, but Bob shot from the hip, man. He told you exactly what was going on in his head. Sometimes it was good. Sometimes it was controversial. But he always gave you that back peek at things you wouldn't ordinarily see in a press release or on the website or whatever. And you knew it wasn't polished and it wasn't, GM told him to say this. Bob was effective because Bob was Bob, and he was doing it on his own. The second that we started putting other stuff up there and it became more of a, hey, we've got a press release this week and let me talk to you about our new announcement. And we had other authors come in, it lost its juice. Yeah. You can't engineer that kind of, that kind of
authenticity,
influence or that kind of effect.
Yeah. And just sort of to give credence to what you said, Bob Lutz is Austrian, who came to America first time with Friedrich von Eberhard von Kuenheim, which was the CEO at the time. He was the CMO. And he figured out back in the 70s that BMWs didn't sell because Americans couldn't understand BMWs. And they came together and they hired this little agency called Italian agency here in Brooklyn, Puris Lintas. And not Madison Avenue, and they created the idea that it's not a BMW, it's the ultimate driving machine. So you have an incredible, and that sort of became, of course, the success of the premium luxury cars like BMW in the US, and so Bob Lutz, just to as a little story here, Bob Lutz is sort of like this incredible, thoughtful cut through the chase, if you will, and being able to achieve something like that we live 50 years later still, and celebrate as a brand success.
Exactly. And that's because of the authenticity.
Yes.
So there is Bob stuff that's working on TikTok. There, whether it's the Dunkin' Donuts folks coming on and showing how they make a particular coffee drink, whether it's the Wendy's guy who's doing the Baconator tutorials and all that kind of, but they're doing it because they're doing it. They weren't told by their company to go out and do it. They weren't given a prescribed set of messages and things to use and hashtags and everything else. They're doing it because they're doing it themselves. If employers are willing to embrace that and recognize that and realize that we can't prescribe it, then they can use TikTok to their advantage. The faster and more enthusiastically that brands try to force their employees out there, the faster they're going to kill the golden goose and turn TikTok into just another channel, just like we've turned almost every other social media platform into just another marketing
and
channel.
GameStop already felt a little bit of that push because they were trying to encourage their employees to do more TikToks, and they said, we'll even give you more hours, and they tied the ability to get more hours during the holidays to this, and it's just like the employees rebelled. There's just like,
do something for my company, and my reward is that I get to do more things for my company.
Well, no, it's not that. It's not that. It's just like they said they wanted these hours, but to tie it to doing this seemed, ludicrous to a lot of the employees. The employees felt like we should be able to get this because we're good salespeople, not because we're doing some TikTok video. I mean, I think that, when brands get involved with trying to manufacture this type of enthusiasm, if I can paraphrase what everybody's saying here, when they get involved with trying to manufacture this enthusiasm, it's not the same as seeing it going on among your employees and amplifying it, which is a completely legitimate thing to do, to say thank you for being a good employee and doing this on behalf of us.
It makes sense on paper, but all content isn't created equal. And if you think back, whether hey, wait, a spokesman can backfire on us? Well, why isn't Hertz still running O.J. Simpson ads? Gee, what happened?
What happened to Jared?
I just dealt with my first HR issue because an employee was posting things that they should not have been posting. Now, on one hand, we've got an army of advocates who work here, who know the inner workings, who can talk about us and talk about how great we are. On the other hand, they also have a personal life that can backfire and sting us greatly. Yeah. So, you have to, anytime somebody puts anytime any of our brands has put a spokesman out front I'm like, okay, do your due diligence on this, because it's as much of a reward as it can be a risk. And it's the same for your employees. Are they qualified? What's their personal life like? You don't know. So you're hanging your shingle on a gamble. And
Yeah.
I vote against it 10 out of 10 times.
There's a nice example. No, you can look right now. There's related to that point. There's a very nice experiment taking place right now. There's Elon Musk. We all know the crazy sort of mercurial guy from Tesla,
who also is suffering from COVID right now, by the way. But that's just
yes, that's true. Really? Yeah, yes, also that's.
I think I gave it to him. I'm just here to spread my love.
It's sort of like, actually, that's a very good point, because that makes him also very human. It's like I think that there's a good. It's sort of nice that they reported, and he said, like, I think I got it or something like that. And on the other side, in Germany, the second largest car company is Volkswagen after Toyota, and Volkswagen, the CEO, D-E-S-S, he's trying to beat this an Elon Musk. And he's every day he's on TV, and every day he's on social media, and it's sort of interesting, and that goes to what Jonathan said of that it's content is not equal to content, because when you hear Elon Musk, you hear when he talks about putting that truck, that crazy truck, launching a truck business. He talks about putting a rocket to the moon, to space exploration. He talks about building a tunnel so that people can go faster from the city of LA, from the center to the airport or something like that. He talks like these incredible things, and of course he delays most of the launches or something like that, not in time and whatever. And when you look at the same spokesperson, and these has like an army of PR people behind him. It's almost ridiculous. It's so noticeable. And what you hear is like today he made an announcement we just had a meeting yesterday with the supervisory board of Volkswagen, and we are now committing not only 30 billion, we are committing 70 billion toward this electrification of the electrical future. So what happens is that two CEOs, that's sort of the beautiful experiment, who are the biggest spokesperson. One, they're also employees of their own companies, but they're the biggest spokesperson. But one is incredibly effective, and Elon Musk. In my opinion, is like cutting through. Becoming in Germany, he's a celebrity now. And on the other side, you have these whose message is very much like a CEO. Like he's talking about investments. He's not talking to the people. He doesn't sell cars. Like or the future, like Musk does. So that's a very good example. With any resources these two have. Like Elon Musk. What he did a few years ago, was it last year? He was upset with his PR. He fired everybody in his PR department, all the communications people, and he just said, like, I'm doing it myself. And you look at,
how's that worked?
I gotta tell you, I love it when
the stock price.
Eric gets wound up, and I'm just sitting here listening, like, wow. Eric, I will pay money if you would just say we have ways of dealing with you. If you would just say that for me,
No.
There is one other thing before we move on to another topic, Bob, and this is important for any company that isn't looking at it and doing an employee engagement program, regardless of what the three of us have said about this. We've all seen it happen where a brand ambassador, an employee who becomes incredibly popular online, all of a sudden starts to feel like they're maybe outgrowing the employer's brand. They get caught up in the attention. They start paying attention to the name on the back of the jersey instead of the name on the front. They can get recruited to go somewhere else, or even decide to go out on their own as an influencer and feel like they don't need to be, the brand representative for their company.
Now you're just going to scare brands into not doing this. And we're going to be back to the bad old days where nobody says anything unless it comes through the top, unless we have this top-down control of our messaging that's like rock solid.
I don't think so. I think you just got to stop trying to engineer it and let your people do what they're going to do on their own.
True.
And if you are going to do this and you are going to promote it, and just have a succession plan, kind of figure out, okay, if this person gets so big that they become attracted to somebody else and they leave, what are we going to do? How do we create more than one influencer? How do we take more than find a couple of employees in here who happen to be
I think
good?
that's so. I think that's such wise advice. I think that's wise advice for anybody. That goes back to anything in advertising, whether you're talking about influencers, whether you're talking about endorsers, whether you're talking about characters that are representing your brand. If you have lots of characters, if you have lots of influencers and lots of voices, if one of them flames out spectacularly, it doesn't take your whole brand down. It's just like if one.
Salesforce has done that, by the way. Salesforce, if you look at what Salesforce, obviously B2B selling to other companies. So they have now hired this brand evangelists. I think they all have titles evangelists. I know a bunch of them. They came through they rise somewhere else in another context. They early on became social media sort of very, very popular on social media. And now their latest, in 4 or 5 cases I know, their latest job is to become Salesforce. So it's like a group. I don't know how many there are in total. I know 4 or 5 of them, and they become. That's maybe the alternative model. They become the spokesperson. So it's like this, rather than your employees, or maybe they help the employees. But I think maybe that's a better solution than trying to curse employees to take their to become influential or something. To become advocates.
We're running out of time, and I've got one more topic I'm just going to touch on real quickly before we move on to the fair, foul, foul. But on the surface of the post-election political ad ban, on the surface, the post-election political ad ban by Google and Facebook seemed like a pretty good idea before the U.S. election. Now many in the political sphere are crying foul, largely inspired by the upcoming all-important senatorial runoffs scheduled for January in the state of Georgia. My question is, given the circumstances, should the duopoly relent, or is this better for America in the light of all the things we've discussed here tonight? I mean, is it better to just let the chips fall where they may and not bother with having political ads running on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube? Or is it better for the big tech companies to relent in this one case and allow the advertising to flow freely? Jonathan, what are your thoughts?
I'm sorry about that. I think, look, I think whether you ban, and I'm putting in air quotes, advertising for political gain or political positioning, whether you ban that or not, the advertising around candidates is still happening. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think so.
The truth of the matter is, you can say, well, we can't have something endorsed by candidate X. Okay, well, you know what? It's just like everything that we've talked about, and to put this all together into one lump, the truth of the matter is this. Whether you're talking about influencers, you're talking about spokesmen, you're talking about political advertising, if you choose not to do a thing, it doesn't mean the thing doesn't happen. So I think as far as the political things go, and as far as all this other stuff, it's going to happen regardless. You're just relinquishing the control of it to the end consumer, the voter, the whatever, for them to express themselves.
It does get a little bit dicey, though. There's a little bit of a difference in this situation, because even though it's a local election or a statewide election in Georgia, it's important to the national well-being for, depending on which side of the political spectrum you fall, you view this as being critical to control of your future. So, that means that everybody from the person in California to the person in New York to the person who's actually voting in Georgia, they all become potential donors. And, Facebook is a huge driver. Yeah, huge driver. YouTube is a huge driver to political donations. So taking away that fundraising ability kind of hampers the campaigns in doing what they need to do in the state to get the votes that they need.
It's putting the control into somebody else's hands.
Right.
That's what it's going to do.
Right. Well,
one of the things that I think is going to be important, though, if they do relent and they do have, ads going out, I think it's going to be very important for them to also continue aggressively enforcing rules against organic disinformation and false posts, right?
Mm.
Well, we're going to ban ads because that'll stop everything. Well, if you're letting somebody post something that's completely false about candidate X, or well, then you've accomplished nothing.
Eric, I'm sorry. That's a great point, because you got to remember, there's an inherent difference between mis and disinformation. And the thing is that if general people organize around a campaign of mis or disinformation, is it true? Or is it just a perspective of things that they're seeding out there? So you either have to find a way to embrace and govern or relinquish. So, it's either way, it's going to happen whether you have control of it or not.
Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do some shameless plugs, starting with Christopher Barger. You can find him at sme.org. That's where he is the Senior Communications Lead. Did I get that right? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Senior Director of Communications. Whatever. it means I got
really super smart, important guy, Christopher Barger.
Well,
what would you like to promote? What would you like to tell us about?
Well, again, sme.org. If you are interested in manufacturing in particular, we've got a lot to offer there. I have recently started writing again and posting again, so you can find me on medium.com at cbarger, and I will be sharing thoughts on what's happening in our industry and what's happening in business across the board. So thank you.
And he's got one of the seminal books out there on social media strategy, so you definitely want to check that out and buy a copy if you've not already. Next up, Eric Joachimsthaler. You can find him at vivaldigroup.com. That's the home of the agency, or rather consultancy, that he runs. Tell us, Eric, what's going on in your world? Tell us about your book.
See, I think that for all the life I remember, for all the years that I've been in business, we created a product somewhere in a factory, and then we pushed it out. And the value was created in the factory, and with some good luck, we could convince consumers to pay an extra price. People pay a little bit more for the BMW, the Mercedes, or an Audi or Tesla or something, and I think that way of creating value has changed. And advertising and communications and everything we talked about was sort of like serving to basically convince consumers to buy something. And I think that game has changed now, and we live in a very connected world, and that's my new book about. And everything connects, and consumers are no longer the target, the audience. Consumers actually are participants in value creation. That's what I write about in the book. Farmers who share data with John Deere about the field, the productivity of their land, the soil condition, the productivity of the farm, and do that with hundreds of thousands of other farms. They increase more the productivity of the agriculture than it is when John Deere sells a $600,000 or $800,000 tractor that is designed with more technology on the top of it, or sensors or something like that. So it is value creation is no longer in the product that we are pushing out to farmers. Let's say value creation is taking place in a network between farmers, between farmers and John Deere, fertilizer company, crop companies, agricultural research universities, and orchestrating that network. I think that's sort of where value is lying, and that changes everything we talked about. It changes social media, it changes advertising, it changes how we communicate, it changes the role of brands, and that's the book. That's what I've been working on for 5 years, and I could tell you the story in every other category: automobile, healthcare, financial services, on and on and on.
And Eric has the experience in this. I mean, both through working with Vivaldi Group and all the work you've done before, and the education that you've put in. I mean, it's just like there's there's so many credentials that are attached to this man. You definitely want to grab his book and read it. Really worth your time.
Thank you. I get $3 if you buy the book, so at least that gives me an omelet when I have for my breakfast. So please buy the book.
We will do that.
Thank you.
Last but not least, Jonathan Sackett. You can find him at grkfresh.com. That's the home of GRK Fresh Greek. Tell us what's going on in your world besides COVID. I guess nothing else has been happening in your world besides COVID.
Oh my God. Okay.
That's the best story.
Yeah, that's all I got. I will make this concise, as concise as possible. First of all, Bob and I are good friends. I have nothing but mad respect for him. Please share this show. I think it's important. I know that every time I'm on the show, I get such interesting feedback on my performance. But I think sharing this show and getting this out there of the best people in the industry, Christopher and Eric are awesome. And I am truly humbled to be on the same show with these guys. They're brilliant. Anytime you can buy their books, network with them or whatever, follow them online, it would behoove you. These guys I'm absolutely honored to be on.
But wait a moment. Earlier you said that you're the smartest guy on this call. Yeah.
Well, I'm smart enough to recognize this.
I gotta say, Jonathan, I agree. You're brilliant.
See, this is when content backfires. This is what we're talking about. Hey, listen, though, I'm honored. You guys are just wonderful people, good humans, and really super smart individuals. So,
did you ever know that you're my hero?
Well, I'm still trying to get Eric to say we have ways of dealing with you, but I guess that happened. And the other thing is that I'll bring up really quick. As most of the people who listen to the show know, I'm an advertising guy. I've worked for the big agencies. Well, now my pet project here is to take this GRK thing over. I have renamed the company. That won't get unleashed until 2021. We're buying up an additional 300 locations. I am in charge of the brand and all the advertising, of course, and I'm a partner in this. So we've got that going on, international. And we're striking a deal right now with Whole Foods to have our own Greek aisle of products in all Whole Foods. And we just met with the highest levels, and I mean the Prime Minister of Greece. And what we're talking to them about is I'm obviously building my internal agency to service our restaurants. Well, what we're talking about doing now is all imports from Greece, that we would be the agency of record of them as well to help promote Greek products, Greek ways of living, you name it. So
may I suggest? Did you make a spelling error when you wrote the name? Because aren't there E missing, 2 E's?
Well, that's
just if your copywriter hasn't seen it or your marketing team.
Well, you know what? That's now you're touching on exactly why I have renamed the company, because that was there long before Jonathan Sackett existed. So that's why we're taking it over, and I will not tell you the new name of it, although we're keeping GRK.
Okay.
There's more after that, and I've promised my friend Bob. I said, listen, I will do a promotion for our Manhattan and our DC stores with Bob, and I'll announce it with Bob, and I'll be giving away free lunches.
Oh.
So all of our food is imported from Greece. Like I said, we're at the highest levels of the government. Quality, no butter, no fried foods. This is really going to go over big. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. So
that sounds fantastic. I've been kind of following along with this. Really, very interested in what you're doing. So, looking forward to finding out what the name is and where you're going with it. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me, or you can find out how to advertise on this program. But check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, Everybody was talking about the Beats campaign this week. America loves black culture. It just doesn't love black people. That's what the campaign was arguing, and it kind of confronts you with it. I love this ad from a standpoint of a brand taking a position on an individual problem that's going on out there in the world. I like that. I'm not sure it's good marketing, because it's just like they don't really get back to Beats till the end, and it's almost like it's almost like an insult to have a brand logo attached to such a powerful message.
We talked about the 7 deadly sins. I think they're jumping into it.
Yeah, I'm not so sure it's good advertising, but it certainly fits the bill of being authentic and being true to who the brand is. So, not so sure. I was kind of weighing either that or YouTube's annual Rewind video being canceled. It seemed like the YouTube story was a little bit not as had no gravitas like the first story did. So I'm going with that. Christopher, what are your thoughts on the Beats campaign?
I think first of all, I'm not sure that I agree about that. It was not good advertising. I think that campaign speaks to the concerns and realities of many of its customers, and it's going to generate and spur some important conversations. And I think that is that gets to the authenticity that we've all been talking about that is missing in so much of what we normally do. But the other thing I think you're going to see, and this will play into another one of the conversations we're about to have, we are in such a polarized environment right now, and brands are getting pulled into political and cultural conversations even when they try not to. So if it's going to happen, gosh, let's own it. Let's own what we believe. Let's own who we are. Let's speak to our audiences, and let's be proactive about it. And I congratulate Beats for doing that. Yeah, it's going to, there's a tangential tie to the brand. And yes, it's going to make some people uncomfortable, but they started something and they're authentic to it and they're being proactive. And I salute the idea.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a powerful message. I'm just not entirely sure that they turned the corner with it back to the brand. Like, it's almost like the brand should have never put their logo on the end of it. They should have just said, maybe put it at the front, like Beats supports this or something. I don't know. It just
think of the Carbonic campaign. The famous Carbonic campaign. Calling Carbonic and how much it paid for Nike in some ways. And basically what Nike did is basically doing the same thing. They tapped into a zeitgeist at that moment and steered a conversation and was very successful. So I think it's sort of a similar type of a repeat, if you will, that kind of a campaign that you could judge from. It could actually work incredibly well. It did for Nike.
Yeah, for Nike, they were much more successful, I think, in the end. Because
I doubt so too, Bob. I doubt so too. I doubt whether this is all going to turn out so well. It's the right thing to do, but they did it turn out so well for Beats.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's a thought.
Because Nike has sort of that reputation, for being put your foot in the mouth all the time, on things. So they stand up for these things, and I think that's why it works.
Well, I think the net is it's a great message, and that's the most important thing, and they put it out in a really elegant way. So it's just like, for me, that's the end all be all, and that's why it's the fair for this week. Now, the fail for this week, I'm going to go with Marketing 101 tells us to not lightly use religious symbols on products. But Amazon seems to have a history of ignoring this advice, especially when it comes to India. Its latest blunders are listing items with Hindi religious symbols on swimsuits. There's nothing like seeing something that represents a god that you believe in plastered across someone's penis, but
bum.
But they had Hindi religious symbols on swimsuits, underwear, and doormats. Now, in all fairness, Amazon didn't first party these products. I mean, these are all third party sellers selling on Amazon, but still, it's kind of like it's Marketing 101, Jonathan, not to be doing something like this.
Yeah, I like the imagery that was in the. I looked at that. I was like, oh boy. And you know what's funny is here in Chicago, there's a Bloomingdale's downtown that used to be a mosque. So it's got all the the crown molding and everything. They kept the exact building intact, and now it's a Bloomingdale's. So. It's the same type of thing. It's like, didn't somebody think this through just a little bit better? I don't know, man. I mean, ridiculous. You gotta, know thy context. I think would be the rule of thumb here.
And the foul
at the same time,
don't.
My opinion, they have 12 million products, Amazon products, and if you take the marketplace, third party, you have more than 350 million products on there. Yeah, you find those things. I mean, how can you control that one?
Well, you can pretty much control it by.
Growing up in Wisconsin, it's funny. They at a lot of my Latino friends at their family get-togethers, they would have what was called a Cheesus. So it was a Jesus sculpture made of cheese, and that was okay. Now I look back at that, I'm like, you guys still do that Jesus thing? They're like, yeah, why? I'm like, okay, just checking.
Well, the foul of the week goes to the Space Force $2 bill. Space Force has continued from the beginning to have brand problems. I mean, like one of the first things they issued when they started the brand was they put forward the Star Trek symbol as being the symbol. I mean, something that uncomfortably looked like Star Trek as the symbol for the entire force, which got a lot of ridicule. Now they're staking their identity on a bill that regularly gets turned down at by cashiers who believe that it's counterfeit because they don't believe that there's actually a $2 bill. So it's in a fitting way, and it's kind of fitting in a way, Christopher, when you think about it. I mean, you've got a $2 bill and it's printed, it's actual legal tender, but it's put into a portfolio that features a photograph of Donald Trump signing the order that created Space Force, and you've got your $2 bill.
Why is Thomas Jefferson on it?
I don't know. It just seems so weird and ludicrous.
I honestly, they figured out how to get people to pay $14.95 to get $2 worth of currency. So I really have to reconsider my life decisions, But what I wanted to say on this, I mean, I can ridicule it, and obviously, I'm anybody who's talked to me for 2 minutes or followed me online or looked at what I like and what I don't like on Twitter or some of the other platforms knows where I sit politically. But I was just saying in the Beats conversation that companies need to speak kind of more directly and more proactively to their audiences and their customers and speak their values to that audience. The Merrick Mint, the National Collectors Mint, the people who are partnering with the Space Force on this certainly seem to know who their customers are and what those customers want to hear. And I'm going to look at it and roll my eyes, and I'm going to think this is ridiculous. But from a pure business standpoint, they are, those two organizations, less the Space Force and more the mints, I think they are doing the same thing that Beat's doing. They know their audience. They know what those folks want to hear, and they are playing to it. And I actually, whether it's a smart decision for the Space Force or not, I think it's a smart decision for Merrick Mint and National Collectors Mint.
To thy own audience be true.
Yeah.
To thy own audience be true. Yes, sir. Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C-Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
It's like, you know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly